This happened in 2016, when I was 15. This would be my last year trick-or-treating on Halloween, so I wanted to make it a big occasion. My mom is pretty laid back, so it turned into a huge multi-day thing for me. The day before Halloween, I would have a sleepover with my friends Davis and Zach, skip school the next day on Halloween, trick-or-treat with Davis and back, and then have a sleepover with just my girlfriend Amber and I. This story carries into both nights, so I'll try to explain the best I can. My basement had just gotten renovated into a man cave, so obviously my friends and I wanted to stay down there for the night. The basement had a long hallway right to the man cave. The light switch to the hallway didn't work. It had a pretty creepy vibe, but for tonight, that would be a good thing. My mom made us cookies, and then we went down into the cave. It was around 11 p.m., and we had just finished watching the original Scream. Our second movie of the night would be Paranormal Activity, which none of us had watched before, and that's why I picked it. I remember pausing the movie not even 30 seconds in because the motion detected light in the backyard turning on. It lit the whole room up, ruining the creepy vibe we had going. So I waited for the 30-second timer so it would turn off and then unpaused the movie. Then after about another 30 seconds, the light went off for a second time, and I started getting annoyed. Davis asked me what kept making it turn on, and I said I had no clue. 30 more seconds passed by, and the light turned off again, and I played the movie. It was at this point I wanted to know what the hell was going on, and so I asked for Davis and Zach to come upstairs with me so I could see what it was. They agreed and went up the stairs to look through my back door. By the time we got there, the light in the backyard had turned off, so it was hard to see. We stood for 5 minutes waiting for something to happen, but nothing ever did. We went back down to the den and decided to turn off the movie for the night and just sit on our phones and talk. We weren't really invested in it anyway. About 2 hours later, everyone was asleep, except for me. I was just scrolling on my phone when the familiar glow of the motion light came through the window for now the 4th time. I was exhausted though, and so I figured it was just another group of kids trying to prank us or something. But the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. I figured I would check the backyard one last time, and just like I thought would happen, no one was out there. I gave up, so I went back down to the den and called it a night. The next night came in the blink of an eye. The next thing I knew, I had a bag full of candy. I felt kind of sad in a way. This was like my childhood ending. However, I figured I should just try and enjoy the night and not reminisce. At this point, I still had lingering thoughts about the previous night, whether I should tell Amber or not. She was scared of everything, and I didn't want to ruin a night with her over a story. We were at one of our last houses on the route we took when Amber let out a loud yell in pain. We asked what happened, and then she told us that she had a rock thrown at her. I turned around to find some guy in a clown mask standing around 15 feet behind us. This was amid the clown epidemic. I told him to get lost, but he just stood there. I analyzed him a bit more and I realized this guy looked like a grown man. He only had a clown mask on also. The rest of his quote-unquote costume was just normal clothes. We kept walking, but all the man did was stand there. It was at this point we called it a night and skipped the last few houses out of anxiety. We went back to my house so my friends could get picked up, and just like that, it was just my girlfriend and I looking at candy on the floor in the den. She asked if we could watch a movie, so I decided that I would just turn on Paranormal Activity again later that night to finish it. I remember the scene in the movie perfectly. It was Ma walking around to find his girlfriend when suddenly the screen went black and the dimmed lights in the cave turned off. My girlfriend and I looked at each other. I realized the power went out. This immediately made me start to get paranoid. The power had never gone out in this house unless there was a storm. I checked my weather app and it said it was normal conditions that night, not even a little bit of rain. I told Amber to stay in the cave, but she felt scared down there, so she decided to come upstairs with me to see what was going on. The generator to the house was in the backyard, and that's when I got the terrible feeling in my stomach. The thoughts of last night creeping back to me, and this time I didn't have Davis and Zach with me, and Amber wasn't very strong. All the worst thoughts came to my mind as I opened the sliding door to the backyard. All I heard was crickets chirping. I figured maybe I was just overthinking. Amber and I passed by the motion light, which didn't kick on now. I was about 5 feet from the generator when I thought I heard a twig snap. Amber and I looked towards the forest on the far side of the yard, with the only sounds being crickets, but we felt like we were being watched. I almost felt like I had to throw up. I decided we'd rather stay in the house with no lights on than be out here. I didn't want to be outside any longer. Amber started making her way inside, and that's when I saw him, the same guy in the clown mask, standing to the side of my shed. We just stared at each other for a while like he was trying to scare us, and then he suddenly jumped forward and started sprinting at us. I ran to the back door and slammed it shut after Amber. We ran down to the cave and we got behind the bar in the corner of the room. That's when I realized I never locked the back door, and we heard a slam from upstairs. Now everything was silent in the man cave. Amber started texting 911 because she was too scared to talk. She explained that there was a man in the house. Minutes felt like hours. Must have been like 10 minutes tops, and the sound I had been dreading to hear came. The basement door opening. I heard footsteps come down the stairs and down the hallway. My girlfriend was breathing too loud. I had to cover her mouth. I heard footsteps come towards our direction and stop. I was starting to think my only option might be to fight. If he finds out where we were, I grabbed a beer bottle from behind the bar and prepared myself mentally to fight if I had to. The room stayed silent for a while, but then we heard sirens come from outside. I realized this was the perfect distraction and moment to strike. In a fraction of a second, I got up, ran at him, and swung at his head with the bottle, but I tripped and fell after I swung, and I hit the ground. I looked up to see that man with the clown mask from earlier. I think his mask somewhat blocked my swing because he barely flinched. I realized this was a stupid idea because it seemed like he was about to go back upstairs anyway, after hearing the sirens. He looked down at me on the floor. I was about to yell at Amber to run as I laid on the floor, scrambling to get up. My legs felt numb, and I realized my life could potentially end right now, but the police could be heard outside. The man stared for another moment before running up the stairs. Then we heard the back door open and slam again. I ran upstairs to let the police in and told them he went out back. And of course, you're wondering, the answer is no. The police somehow never caught this guy, to my knowledge. I can't go down to that man cave alone anymore without feeling anxious, even to this day. So we would hang out at Amber for a while. After that, there's nothing I can do but look back and be grateful that we're still alive. I'll never forget that feeling of looking up and seeing that clown mask staring down at me as I flailed on the ground.
This is a disturbing memory from my young childhood. I was about 7 or 8 years old. My mom would usually take my brother and I trick-or-treating. But this particular year, after school, she dropped me off at my friend Sean's house, where Sean, our friend Johnny, and I would go together. Johnny and Sean were a year older than me. We met while I was playing with my brother on the block. Johnny and Sean lived around the block from me. Sean had a weird upbringing that I never really understood. His sister was like 20 years old. There was a big gap between them. She was always his caretaker, it seemed. Whenever I was at his house always smelled like cat, and his sister always had a different guy over. It seemed like his sister was always cold to me in the sense that she'd never acknowledge me or say hi or anything. Sean's dad was never in the picture, and his mom, I believe, was always working out of town. I guess I only met Sean's mom a few times. We never really stayed in touch for long enough for me to figure all this out. Anyway, my mom dropped me off at Sean's, expecting that Sean's mom would be trick-or-treating with us. After saying goodbye, I went into his house. Johnny was already there. We all had big pillow sacks to fill with candy. This was around the time that I learned that neither Sean's mom nor sister were coming with us to supervise. I was young, so I sort of felt slightly uncomfortable knowing that Johnny and Sean would be leading the way. But at the same time, I felt a sense of excitement that we'd have more freedom. I knew for a fact my mom would not have approved of us going unsupervised though. So eventually we were off into the neighborhood, walking around, doing our rounds. Door to door, quite a few people asked if we were alone or where our parents were, and Johnny would always be the one to use the same lie that his mom is up ahead with his sister. It worked every time. This was on a Friday, so we didn't get to start at trick-or-treating until around 5 o'clock. But we didn't have school the next day, so we intended on going until our pillow sacks were completely full. We took a break after a couple of hours and went to Sean's, where he heated up a bunch of frozen pizzas. At the time, I was so jealous of the apparent freedom he had in his house, not having parents who cared about what he did. But looking back now, I count myself super blessed to have grown up in a household with 2 strict parents. After we hung out at his house for an hour and watched Halloween specials on Nickelodeon while eating pizza and candies, Johnny eventually was picked up by his mom. But Sean and I wanted to keep going, so we eventually headed back out for round 2. It was dark out now, and it had to be past 8 p.m. There were a lot less trick-or-treaters now. We tried to go to certain blocks we hadn't gone down yet, which meant straying further away from Sean's house. We found a block we hadn't touched yet and continued knocking on doors. Some houses didn't answer at this hour, and mostly everyone else had a comment about us being alone or how it's getting late. We noticed a man pushing a stroller a couple houses down behind us. He was walking very slowly in our direction, probably a dad, trick-or-treating for his young child. As we continued going door to door, the man with the stroller got closer. Eventually we heard him going, "Shh," and singing softly. Eventually he caught up to us and he said, "How's the trick-or-treating, boys?" And we replied, "Good," at the same time. And then he said, "It's pretty late. I'm on my way back to my house. I can give you guys the rest of my candy." Sean and I looked at each other with telling faces as if we just hit the jackpot. Sean asked what kind of candies, and he said a bunch of bags of different things. He said he didn't get to give much away because he wanted to take his daughter out for a trick-or-treat stroll. He did have a bag dangling on one of the handles of the stroller, which was filled with some candies. The stroller was fully covered by a folding piece on the top, so we couldn't see his daughter. He said she's asleep and he didn't want to wake her up, but he pointed ahead and said his house is just up this way. So we followed behind him as he pushed the stroller. He was walking a little faster now. As we walked, I realized there was next to no one else out at this point. Even though it was a Friday night, it seemed like a quieter side of the neighborhood. The man talked to us as we walked, asking us questions, what part of the neighborhood we were from, where we went to school, basic stuff. I let Sean answer most of the questions, him being even just a year older than me at that age. I felt like he was the one who should take lead. On multiple occasions as we walked, the man would lean into the stroller and talk in a high pitch to his daughter. Then he'd turn back and smile at us. We finally made it to his house. He led us up the walkway with the stroller and unlocked his door. After he opened it, he brought the stroller with his daughter inside first and then invited us to come inside. Sean led the way, so I followed. I was the one to ask if we could leave the door open, and the man paused and then said, "Yeah, of course." He said he'll be right back as he goes to get the candy bags. He pushed the stroller into the middle of the living room, only about 10 feet away from where we were standing. I nudged Sean because I felt uncomfortable. I whispered, "Why would he leave the candy so far away?" Sean didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the living room and then walked up to the stroller. He lifted up the folding part that was covering the baby, and he was disturbed. He hurried back to me whispering, "Let's go." He was full on running once we got outside, and I followed behind, which was a bit tougher because we had those heavy pillow sacks. I still was confused about what he saw, but just then, we heard a woman's voice. "Excuse me." It was one of his neighbors. She came running over to us and asked if we know that man. And it was at this point that Sean spilled the beans and said he offered us his leftover candy, but he was pushing a stroller with a fake baby in it. I remember getting goosebumps as he said that. The woman said, "Yeah, that man doesn't have a child. I saw he was walking with him." She took us to her car and drove each of us home. I know getting into a stranger's car after that was another questionable move. The woman came to my front door to talk to my mom about what we just told her. My mom was distraught after I told her every last detail about the night. She sent me to my room while my parents called the police on that man. My parents never told me anything about what happened after that. I believe they wanted to shelter me from any more exposure to the situation. My mom didn't want me going over to Sean's house anymore, and I know she had quite a bit to say to Sean's mom. I did see Sean at school once in a while still, and we'd remain cordial, but our friendship was never the same.
It was Halloween weekend. It was falling on a Friday this year. My mom always takes decorations and giving out candy very seriously. It's almost like she has to compete with the neighbors to have the most sought-after house to trick-or-treat at. We live on a corner in a regular suburban neighborhood, so when we're decorating, we also decorate the side yard of the house too. Since Halloween was a Saturday this year, kids started trick-or-treating earlier in the day. However, it was a cloudy, cold day, and there was a chance of rain in the forecast. My mom apparently couldn't understand that this may have been a factor as to why there weren't many trick-or-treaters out. Instead, after a few trick-or-treaters seemingly skipped our house, she assumed it was because there weren't enough decorations out to attract the trick-or-treaters. She told me to go get whatever containers were left in the attic containing decorations. I insisted this wasn't necessary, but she insisted otherwise and forced me to. So I went up to the attic, which is directly above my bedroom. The attic door is in the hallway upstairs. I pulled down the door and climbed up the ladder. We had the holiday containers sorted a specific way, so I went over to where the Halloween containers were. There were only a couple still left up there. I opened one to see what was inside and said, "Good enough." I started dragging the container out towards the attic door. Then I carefully slid the container down the ladder. As I was about to climb down out of the attic, I thought I heard something on the opposite side of the attic, like a piece of wood cracking under the weight or pressure of something. I looked over to the wall of containers in the far corner. It's an attic though, so the sound of wood snapping or cracking really wasn't that weird. I climbed down out of the attic and brought the decorations downstairs. From there, my mom and I put out some more decorations in the front yard. It was really windy and felt like rain at any second. There really weren't many trick-or-treaters at all. My mom was disappointed because she goes all out with the candy too. She's always been one of those people who makes a bunch of homemade goodie bags with a bunch of different candies inside. I could see how upset she was that she wasn't going to give most of them away. At this rate, the day progressed and I was in my room playing video games on my laptop, while my mom was downstairs in the living room and kitchen handing out candies to the few trick-or-treaters that would come. And then it started to rain, and that pretty much put a damper on the rest of the day, trick-or-treater-wise. I was gaming in my room when I heard a crack from above my room in the attic. Again, not really abnormal, but I made a mental note that that was the second time I heard something from up there. The rest of the day was rainy, and that night it turned into a thunderstorm, perfect for a Halloween night. I used to be a big gamer in my teens, and so instead of going out with friends on a Saturday night, I would often just stay in playing video games. Unfortunately, this night was no exception to that. I stayed up really late into the night past my parents. It was still raining outside. Then I heard something above me again. This time it sounded like footsteps. I was wondering if my mom was in the attic putting stuff away, but it was late at night. I sat and listened for a while. The sound stopped. I paused my game and went out into the hallway after a couple minutes, and I saw that the attic door was open. I now heard noises downstairs in the kitchen. I heard the sound of things being moved around in the fridge. My heart was racing now. I tiptoed down the hall to my parents' room and quietly opened the door. When I saw both my parents fast asleep in bed, I felt my stomach twist and I felt sick. I quietly closed the door and went up to my dad to shake him awake. He woke up easily, and I whispered to him, "There's someone in the house." He immediately sat up and said, "What?" I said, "There's someone in the kitchen right now, in the fridge. I think they're hiding in the attic." My dad is not a large or confrontational man. He keeps a police baton under his bed in the case of an emergency, but I don't think he ever thought he'd have to actually use it. My dad told me to stay quiet. He went to go look out into the hall quietly. When he came back inside, he whispered that he saw someone down the hall climbing into the attic.
He shut the bedroom door and he locked it, and then called 911. By now, my mom was awake too, but we all stayed as quiet as possible and didn't freak out. It was now a waiting game until the police showed up. My dad went downstairs to open the front door. The attic door was now shut. The police had to go inside and they found some homeless-looking man hiding in the corner behind that wall of containers. The sounds I was hearing were, in fact, from a person the whole time. The man, while seeming dirty and kind of scary looking, apparently was very straightforward and honest that he simply walked in when he saw the front door was open the day before and he had no place to sleep. He brought one of our blankets up there and there was a jar of peanut butter up there too that he was eating. The whole thing is still very disturbing, and I wonder how things would have played out if I or my father confronted the man instead of the police. My parents didn't press any charges.